For those of y'all that I have not met yet, my name is Lana Hansen. I'm the executive director of Texas Blue Action. And so, those of you that are familiar with the work that we do, we run a large scale relational program across the state of Texas. And we have been doing that as well as a block captain program in neighborhoods since 2018. I can't even believe it when I say that. We do run the largest volunteer relational network in the country, meaning that it is folks reaching out to people that they know as trusted messengers and making sure that they understand when to vote, who's on their ballot, where they can vote, and that we are trying to increase the civic engagement that our state truly lacks. And if anybody listening right now says, but all my friends vote, I'm here to tell you that is absolutely not true, because if they did, we would have a much higher voter turnout in this state than we do, because Texas is not a red state. It is a non-voting state. And our biggest battle right now is between Democrats and the couch, Democratic voters and their couch. Too many of them just choose to stay home. And so it's all of our job to make sure that we are getting them to the polls and making sure that the best candidates that run in this state get elected to office. So with that, you're all here tonight because you know that we have a big runoff election coming up this month. In fact, early voting starts on Monday, and we do not have any weekend days for early voting. And then the day after the holiday weekend is going to be election day. So it is going to be imperative that we are all making sure that people understand they will not have a day to vote on a weekend. So they're going to have to organize around their work schedules to make sure that they cast their ballot. And if they plan on traveling and not coming back until Tuesday, that is election day. So they need to make sure that they cast their ballot during early vote. So the first two candidates that we are going to talk to this evening that are in our runoff and will be on that ballot is for the Attorney General's office, which is arguably one of the most important and powerful Attorney General seats in this entire country. And we have two incredible candidates that are running for this election. The rules here are, hi, Senator Johnson and Mr. Jaworski, thank you so much for joining us and spending your time to talk to us today. I want to first start by saying that we're going to give each of you 2 minutes to answer the questions, and then a minute rebuttal if you would like. If there's anything that you feel like you want to go longer on, please let me and our team know, and we are happy to send that response out via email to anybody that's been here today. But in order to be respectful of your time, we are going to do a 2-minute time limit. Ben is running the clock, and we'll rotate each question who answers first. Okay. So everybody, I'm going to tell you a little bit about our Attorney General candidates that are here. First, we have Senator Nathan Johnson. He is currently a Texas state senator. His hometown is Dallas, and that is where he represents currently. He's been in elected office since 2018. There have been 4 legislative sessions in that time, and Senator Johnson has filed 433 bills and passed 134 of them into law. He is also the vice chair of the Senate Jurisprudence Committee and a member of the Senate Committees on Business and Commerce, Transportation, Economic Development, and Water, Agricultural, and Rural Affairs. Nathan is a seasoned litigator and a mediator in the Dallas office of Thompson Coburn LLP. That's what I get for trying to talk so fast, y'all. I'm trying to squeeze it all in here. And next we have Mr. Jaworski, Mr. Joe Jaworski. He served as the 55th mayor of Galveston. Mayor Joe, widely regarded as the city's most responsive and accessible mayor in its nearly 2-century history. He led Galveston's transformative recovery from an epic natural disaster following a successful 3-decade-strong trial law practice in Gulf Coast state and federal courts. Joe is now a highly sought-after national and international mediator. Welcome, Mr. Jaworski. Mayor, I'll say. Excellent. Okay, we're going to get started. The first question, we'll start with the senator tonight, and then the next first answer will go to you, Mayor. So the first question here is, how would you best describe the duties of Attorney General of Texas, and how does your past experience prepare you for those duties? Senator?
Thank you, Lana. Thank you for everybody for being on. And Nathan is just fine. We're in candidate world here.
Okay.
And we're people. The Attorney General's office has two really simple charges in the Constitution, and that's to represent the state of Texas. And we'll talk in a second about what that means. And secondly, to essentially police corporations to make sure they don't exceed their powers, they don't abuse their powers, that they don't use their power to control government. I think those are a couple of areas that the Attorney General's office has been neglecting. I think our state and federal governments have been neglecting those functions. And the Attorney General's office is really the office of this moment, I think, as we see governmental fundamental principles fall apart, separation of powers, abuse of power. So the Attorney General needs to represent the state, and that doesn't mean represent the governor or the legislature. It means represent the people's interest. It means you are going to prosecute corruption, investigate corruption, not participate in corruption. It means you are going to work with district attorneys to keep streets safe, not against district attorneys. And it means you're supposed to be the guardians of competition in the marketplace, not facilitators of the great aggregation of wealth and power in the commercial sector, which is what's happening. We have corruption because we have runaway power going to too few hands. The Texas framers did not trust anybody with concentrated power. That is why the Attorney General is an independently elected executive office with the power to act as a check and a balance against abuse of power wherever it is. That can be in defending laws from the Environmental Protection Agency. It can be in suing the Trump administration when he withholds $700 million in bilingual education funding. It can mean working with other attorney generals around this state. It can mean preserving your right to vote, preserving your rights on a civil basis. It can be not going against a judge that determines you have the right to an abortion. There is so much work that this office can and must do in order for the state to fulfill its potential. That's my time. Look forward to the rest of the conversation.
Way to be right on time. That was great. All right, Mayor Jaworski.
Lana, thank you so much. Well, the Attorney General's office can be something very different than what we've seen over the last 30 years. Ken Paxton, Greg Abbott before him have ruined the office and its prestige. People are leaving in droves. So, going to the statute, child support collection and disbursement, Attorney General opinions, public securities or the bonds that cities, counties, and school districts, they all have to be approved by the Texas Attorney General. And finally, the Texas AG is the guru over which he interprets the Texas Public Information Act. And anytime a city or a county or a school district wants to hold documents or information back from the public, they appeal to the AG. So you can see it's a very powerful office. 4,200 employees, most of which are in child support. But just think about this, Lana. What if in the 53 satellite offices across the state where child support is collected and dispersed, think about the souls who walk in and out of that door every day. It's got to be at least 1 million over a 4-year AG term. Every single one of them should be offered the opportunity to register to vote before they leave that office. Imagine an attorney general, just because he wants to, could actually assign a portion of the $1 billion biennium budget to provide for $500 monthly stipends so that interested employees at the child support satellite offices can become voter deputy registrars and make sure that these people, the working poor, whatever you may want to call them, are registered. It could be a redistribution of power, especially now that Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act has been gutted. We need to outregister these people. The Texas Attorney General can be the leader of that movement. That's what the AG ought to be.
Excellent. Do either of you have a rebuttal for anything or something you want to add on? We've got 1 minute.
I think Nathan's muted.
Yeah, Nathan, you're muted.
Sorry, it seems to automatically be muting. I don't have a rebuttal at all. I think there's so much that the Attorney General's office has to do that, Joe and I together have had 4 minutes and we've covered some of the territory, and that's just part of why we have these conversations, is so we can learn about the office.
Excellent. That's great. Well, that's a perfect segue into the next question, which this time, Mayor, you'll go first, which is, what are your immediate priorities if you become Attorney General of Texas?
Well, on day one, when I take the oath of office, there's any number of lawsuits we will immediately reverse the state's position on. I'll pick one. You remember the Texas Dream Act? a 2005, 2003 educational policy that was passed when Rick Noriega filed it. Great educational policy. It says that if you're a dreamer and you graduated from a Texas high school and you were there for 3 years and you indicate your intention to become a citizen or a permanent resident, you get in-state tuition. Well, Ken Paxton and Pam Bondi colluded to file a lawsuit in front of Trump Judge 1, Reed O'Connor, and they undid the policy that has been a trailblazer for the state of Texas. Day one, we will reverse the pleadings, and the state of Texas will support the Texas Dream Act. And there's 3 or 4 other lawsuits that you could do about that. Priorities, Lana, 3 transformative divisions. Number 1, the division of affordability and value. Now, I could go on for a while about this, but in its essence, imagine 100 lawyers or more working every day to make affordable the American dream for 32 million Texans. The second division, a division of elections and voter encouragement, the exact opposite of voter suppression regime that Ken Paxton and his cronies have put upon us. One thing that we can measure, and this is a metric you can hold me accountable for, we will register every high school senior because the law requires principals in every school, public or private, to offer registration twice a year to the 18-year-olders. I'm telling you, every May, over 500,000 seniors graduate from our high schools. Over a 4-year term, 2 million. Again, redistribution of power. And finally, a division of ethics and integrity, which has the charming acronym of DEI. This will finally blow the whistle on corrupt politicians and the billionaires who fund them.
Excellent. Thank you. And also, again, right on time. I really appreciate you all on this. All right, Nathan, Senator. It's hard for me not to say Senator.
Nathan's fine. You got to get the office to work. You have to make markets work. You have to make government work. When I say get the office to work, there's been such a drain of talent, such a drain of spirit, such a corruption of the culture inside the Attorney General's office. I think the number one priority is to recruit good, decent, intelligent, hardworking, civic-minded people back to that office. It has, for 100 years, been a place where people wanted to go and do good work. It has ceased to be that. I look forward to there being a good Democratic Attorney General in office to where we have that quality of person in there. Once you have those people in there, you also have to go back to the private sector and do what we haven't been doing. And consumer protection laws have been ignored. Consumers are being abused and preyed upon, and we need to reinvigorate consumer protection laws. Look, even looking back at some of the prior Republican attorneys general, there has historically been vigorous consumer protection that has gone away. And guess what? We are getting eaten, and it's not good for anybody. And then when you want to move on to making government as a whole, an antitrust law is the other area. It's a big thing globally right now because it has run away from us since 1980. We have ceased understanding how markets work. The attorneys general are the people who are supposed to be disciplining markets and keeping them out of government authority. Finally, in making government, the attorney general is charged with advising agencies, with representing agencies. Somebody like the State Board of Education, which has an internal lawyer who basically is doing what Ken Paxton tells him to, what Greg Abbott tells him to, what Donald Trump tells him to. You need to represent these agencies, including the TCEQ. You want them to act in the interest of the environment. They need a good lawyer on their side. And to also keep people in line, with my 10 remaining seconds, Greg Abbott is trying to defund the police because Grand Prairie wanted to let Muslims have a pool party. That kind of stuff doesn't happen when you have a good attorney general in office.
Excellent. All right. Next question. And this one, you'll go first this time, Nathan. Under your leadership, what will be the relationship between the Texas Office of Attorney General and the Trump administration?
It's going to be pretty rocky at first. Look, the 23 and now 24 Democratic attorneys general have stopped 41 different executive actions by the Trump administration. They've sued him like 80 times. I don't think any attorney general should have as a goal suing the president of the United States or various agencies, but Trump violates the law so often, whether it's the Administrative Procedures Act, whether it's states' rights under the 10th Amendment, individual rights under the 4th, 15th, and 14th Amendment, and the First Amendment. He's violating the law all the time. Attorneys general do have a unique power and position, and the country is dependent on us right now to really hold us together. I think the whole concept of separation of powers, of a judiciary that's independent of the executive, independent of the legislature, and that whole circle is collapsing. And I really think that I see the role of the Texas Attorney General to be joining, unfortunately, the highly partisan coalitions that have been built. The Democratic Attorneys General actually stand for the rule of law. They actually stand for fundamental constitutional principles in this country. I will be suing the Trump administration frequently. Hopefully, they get the message after they get a colossal whooping across the board in multiple states and across the slate in Texas, and understand that their actions are alienating people and damaging our country. And maybe, just maybe, we could go back to the days when attorneys general worked in conjunction with the Department of Justice and the Federal Trade Commission and the Environmental Protection Agency to actually protect people, to actually promote the good things that can happen in our country, and to stop the bad things. But right now, it's a pretty antagonistic relationship. Unfortunately, I'm trained at antagonistic relationships. You do have to know how to navigate them. And it's not something I look forward to, other than the feeling of gratification of being able to win against the Trump administration in court, which I look forward to.
Excellent. Thank you, Nathan. Joe, your turn.
Lana, the word to describe my relationship with the Trump administration: hostile. And let me also add that anybody in the state government who drapes themselves with Trump's endorsement, they're part of the same problem: hostile. Now, I'm looking forward to Gina Hinojosa being our governor and Vicky or Marcos being our lieutenant governor, and on and on. But let's just answer the question as it relates to the federal government. Look, when you deal with bullies in court, there's only one way to do it, and that is full throttle. And so the Texas Attorney General ought to take every opportunity to enjoin, sue, and fight the Trump administration. It always comes through Texas at some point, Lana. And whether it's voting, or whether it's Christian nationalism and putting the Ten Commandments in public schools, I know where that's going. We learned all about the Bible at First Presbyterian Church when I grew up, and we didn't need it at our school. And yet there is a movement afoot, and it is incumbent upon attorneys general to join the movement and to do something about it. And I think there is an organization called DAGA, Democratic Attorneys General Association, and every Democratic elected attorney general in the 23, 24 states is a member. I'll be a member. And what we'll do is we'll all sort of separate and delegate, and people will file suits, and everyone will pile on, because that's what we do. There's power in numbers. Federal courts, state court, wherever it may be, Lana, this is the answer. Be hostile to the Trump administration, work them down to the bone, and then they will be gone, and everybody who was with them will be gone.
Excellent. Thank you for that response. Okay, the next question is, many attendees here tonight also want to know how you would protect academic freedom and freedom of speech on college campuses. Joe, you'll be first.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, so, I'm all for free speech, and, we can't have a regime where it's like, children, you can't talk about issues. I will tell you this, there is a First Amendment, and it's very clear. These are young adults who occupy our colleges and universities, and they have rights. The Texas Campus Security Act, for example, is a law that the senator voted for, and there were, a law passed, and this arose out of the 2024 demonstrations that are in court right now on the UT campus. And the legislature in 2025 decided that was a good idea to pass a law that kids had to stop at 10 p.m. Well, fortunately, a federal judge appointed by Ronald Reagan in Austin decided to say the perfect phrase: the Bill of Rights does not go to bed at 10 p.m. And fortunately, that law was enjoined. As Attorney General, I'm going to be on the side of the students, on the side of the professors, on the side of free expression. And what that means is we're not going to have one religion over another in public schools. We're going to let tenure take its place, because that is what colleges and universities have always operated under. We're going to let diverse education flourish on campuses. I cannot believe what is happening at Texas A&M, University of Texas, University of Houston, all our tier one universities, but it's also at colleges like community colleges. And so the Attorney General is going to be a constant visitor on campuses. This is what I did when I was mayor, Lana. I was a constant visitor at the schools in Galveston, and we had coffee with the mayor. Imagine an attorney general, unlike Paxton, but one who proudly travels the state, is with the youth, registering them when they graduate from high school, staying with them when they're in colleges and university, and being a constant presence where great thought happens, our universities and colleges.
Excellent. Thank you. Nathan?
I mean, finally, y'all get to have some fun, a point of contention between Joe and I. A little bit here. I don't think there's any disagreement that we both value. We all value academic freedom and freedom of speech. He points out a state statute that many argue was constricting free speech on campuses. It's a bill that I voted for and I would vote for again, and I have it in common with James Tallarico and Gina Hinojosa, both voted for the very same bill. So if you have really good Democrats who, in some cases, disagree with each other, because there were other Democrats who voted against the bill, it's not a very good litmus test. I'll tell you what those of us who voted for the bill are thinking. I want to preserve the rights of my daughter, who is going to be a senior at UT, to express her speech and her right to protest, not to have the Proud Boys assembling on campus and taking over. And that's really what that bill was about. As for a judge finding it unconstitutional, actually, I do want to ban protests on a campus at 3 in the morning because I want my daughter to get good grades. College campuses are not supposed to be the designated sites for global protests. You preserve the rights of those in the academic community, including students, including faculty, including people there. So there's a point of disagreement there, but the general principle that universities are being silenced under the guise of anti-DEI or anything with the word social in it. You go to Florida, it gets really crazy. The Attorney General does have influence, can issue opinions, should be advising, warning academic institutions to the extent they are limiting the ability of university professors to lecture students and to venture into controversial topics. That's actually the hallmark of what higher education is supposed to be, where students are exposed to conflicting thoughts. That needs to be preserved. Students' rights to speak on campus needs to be preserved. Agencies need to be advised. And if necessary, the Attorney General does need to step in. If the governor is putting too much pressure on universities, if the Trump administration is threatening to take away funding if universities don't go by his dogma, the AG is involved.
Joe?
Yeah, just a quick rebuttal. I assure you, the Republican senators did not craft and pass the Texas Campus Security Act to limit the speech of the Proud Boys. Okay, let's be honest with each other. It was about limiting democratic thought and students who had a difference of opinion on the question of Palestine and Israel, and that's why the law passed.
Yeah, if we're going to go into that, go back a little further in the history. If you go back to 2019, it was actually Republicans who introduced laws that opened up college campuses to these massive protests by people who aren't in college. And I was nervous at the time. I was a freshman senator, and I thought, oh my gosh, these are supposed to be college campuses where kids can protest, not where the world convenes to protest. And I was a freshman senator when people said, oh, you don't want to be perceived as being against free speech. The Republicans were mad they couldn't have Turning Point USA there or Proud Boy rallies, and they wanted to open up canvases or campuses so that they could alter kids' minds. They pulled it back. I want campuses to be places where kids go to school and can speak freely, which is what they are. That is why James Tallarico, Gina Hinojosa, and I, and John Busey, and half the Democrats in the House voted for this bill.
Great. Thank you both for that rebuttal. I appreciate it. So the next question is, what strategic litigation would you focus on as AG? Also, to the extent that there is ongoing litigation from Ken Paxton's leadership that you do not agree with, how do you plan on handling that? Can you give examples? For example, do you plan to abandon ongoing litigation against Act Blue or CAIR?
And I think I forget who's going first.
It's you this time. Thank you.
Okay, very good. The easiest thing to do is start with the examples you gave to talk about what you wouldn't do. And please forgive the sunshine here. I'll move in a second. Yeah, I can't imagine that the suits against CARE and Act Blue are meritorious. You always have to examine the facts alleged, the evidence presented. It is possible that Act Blue is doing something wrong. It doesn't seem likely, and it is a pattern of Ken Paxton filing lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit that are frivolous. His lawsuit against Jolt, the organization that was registering Hispanics to vote, was dismissed. And the judge noted, and I believe it was a Trump-appointed judge, not only did he lack evidence to support the allegations, he didn't even allege facts. So I don't want to get vulgar, but most of what he's doing is bullshit. And I do think it will be incumbent upon the new attorney general to go through and just cull the garbage that he's just amassed here. And that's going to take some doing. But a deeper, and you can take the 10 Commandments, you can take the collusion with the federal government on the DREAM Act, in-state tuition. But in addition to his lawsuits, he's filing these menacing civil investigative demands, letters. He issued a letter yesterday against, I think it was CVS, telling them that he's going to come after them for violating federal law for using DEI in their healthcare administration. This is garbage. So the first thing to do is clear that stuff out of the way. The kinds of things that we ought to be doing are really a lot less politically sexy. They're not likely to make as many headlines unless you're suing big tech or suing big medicine or suing big family housing. But even then, they're probably not going to get as much attention. But I think the job of the attorney general is not to get attention, but it is to protect and preserve individual rights, to protect and preserve our system of government, and to protect and preserve us from predation in the marketplace. I'll be directing my efforts to making things work for our state, not to grabbing headlines for a partisan agenda.
Great. Joe?
Lana, there's not much good to say about Ken Paxton's tenure, and I'm sure my staff is going to have a field day dismissing lawsuit after lawsuit, and on the ones that someone else filed that we had to respond, flipping our pleadings to where we're going to be with the people rather than the MAGA agenda. So that's number one. And I mean, literally, we could spend a long time going down the list, and I bet we don't even know half of it. On the Act Blue and Win Red, look, forget Win Red for a minute. He's suing Act Blue to try and stop us from raising money. The only thing I heard in the allegations in the lawsuit is that Act Blue had a few occasions where they continued to collect a monthly contribution. Look, I mean, you don't need to sue someone over that. You need to stop them and they have a call. You have civil investigative demand authority where you can simply pick up the phone and say, look, I'm going to issue a discovery request to you that you have to respond to. Will you please fix this? And the same thing with WinRed. These people want to keep making money. They don't want to like take money from, senior citizens. But when it comes to some of the essential parts of the Democratic platform, I'm going to sue the state of Texas over the fact that we have unconstitutional abortion law. I believe that it is a woman's equal right to decide when to start her family. And it is her God-given right to survive a difficult pregnancy and not die. So we have a state law that has completely screwed that entire bottom line up. And the Attorney General needs to change it. And so that's going to be something that I look forward to doing. Also, I want to sue to stop voter suppression. And you may find it intense that I would be suing my own state, but that's what it comes down to.
Excellent. Thank you both. That was great. Under your leadership, how would you address staffing and reorganizing the OAG? Under Paxton, important units like the human trafficking, consumer protection, and child support enforcement have suffered high staff turnover. Can you speak to some of your practical plans for your new vision of the office?
Well, I think I start with this one, Lana, right?
Yep,
I believe it'll be a new day. And, I promise you, and this is not about me. The same thing would happen if Nathan's the AG. It is going to be national news that a Democrat is elected and is the attorney general. And hopefully, again, there'll be a governor and a lieutenant governor, et cetera, Supreme Court judges. But let me just say that there's going to be an overwhelming response. You want to serve your state attorneys. And this, I think, is where my experience as an attorney for 35 years to this day, mediating a difficult case out of Cherokee County this morning involving a whole bunch of great lawyers in Dallas and Houston and Lubbock. These are my friends. I know the judges. I know the lawyers. We are going to be able, Lana, to recruit great talent to serve the state again. You remember even Ken Paxton had some good lawyers on there. Darren McCarty and Jeff Mateer were both willing to land the Google settlement on a state salary, and they left because they found Paxton's behavior repugnant. And so therefore, Paxton had to hire outside counsel. Excellent lawyers, to be clear, Mark Lanier and his great law firm. But that cost the state of money hundreds of millions of dollars in attorney's fees. And so here's an opportunity to recruit some of the best and brightest on the appellate stage. For example, Lana, let me tell you something. Get elected and just imagine having a conversation with one of the three Democratic justices on SCOTUS and ask them for a short list from each of them as to who their greatest clerks were. And maybe that'll be the list where we start with a new Solicitor General. So look, there's a lot of opportunity to hire excellent new help. And I think a lot of people are just waiting it out as best they can to get new leadership that they can be proud of. There's a lot of good workers there now. Some of them will have to go.
Great. Thank you. Nathan?
And the question is, tell me the question again.
Under your leadership, how would you address staffing and reorganizing the OAG? Under Paxton, important units like the Human Trafficking, Consumer Protection, and Child Support Enforcement have suffered high staff turnover. Can you speak to some of your practical plans for a new vision for the office?
Yeah, I very briefly, but kind of no, because I think it would be either phony or remiss of me to purport to have in my mind exactly how I want to restructure this organization. It's massive. I think that the problems at the Attorney General's office are more cultural than they are structural. There's not like a division of let's be corrupt. There's just an ethos in that office of let's be corrupt or let's be ideological pigs. That's what's going on in the office. That needs to stop. I do think there are some organizational changes. I have talked to a few people. I'm not comfortable saying that I can walk into that organization and rebuild it. What I'm going to be relying upon is people who have experience in the Attorney General's office dating back multiple administrations. I've talked to somebody who's worked for 5 attorneys general. I want to bring some of those people in and start figuring out how in this particular moment can this office function in the context of a highly political, highly partisan state. And that may require some structural changes. There has been insufficient attention to consumer protection, insufficient attention to individual rights, to civil rights, to abortion rights, to antitrust law. To the extent we need labels and departments, we can do that. But we also, to some extent, have an all hands on deck. These are talented lawyers. They don't just work on one thing. So I defer a little bit to answering that question until I'm in the office because I think overconfidence can be deadly, and I want to be humble enough to go in there and make sure that I have help from people who really know what they're doing and make things work right.
Great. Thank you for that. We've gone a little over time as we are going to speak to the lieutenant governors, but I have one final, or lieutenant governor candidates. I have one final question. Actually, it's kind of a 2-part question for you to wrap this up, which is, what do you want to express to voters that you have not already done so or done this evening? And the second part of that question, because we kind of missed it it was a part of the first question, but I don't think either one of you addressed it, was how does your experience make you well equipped for this office? And Nathan, I think you go first this time.
Very good. How does my experience equip me for this office? It's just where I left off. Everybody believes and agrees, we all agree and believe, that the Attorney General's office has been turned into a wicked partisan tool, that you're using the resources of the office to do bad things. That means it's not available to do good things. We all want to fix that. In order to depoliticize and departisanize that Attorney General's office is going to require some serious political skill because the office works in a political environment. I do believe that it's going to require not just political instincts, not just legal skills, but skills honed over time. And I believe that my experience in office working against Republicans, working with Republicans, I've passed bills that help the Attorney General's office do the right thing. I've opposed bills that give the Attorney General's office power to do damage to our state. I've worked against the governor, with the governor. I've worked with the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. I've passed legislation to defend people from artificial intelligence scam and to penalize polluters, which is something else that the Attorney General's office can do. I do believe that the experience in state government is not only relevant, but I think it's prerequisite probably to being effective in office. If I'm not the Attorney General, if it's Joe Jaworski, I hope that his experiences will translate, and I'm sure he hopes the same for me. But I do think the experience matters. The first part, I guess, what haven't we told voters so far? Taking it away from me personally, I want to emphasize to voters how important I think the Attorney General's office is, and how important it is that each of you and each of us take an interest in that office, separate and apart from a U.S. Senate race, a governor's race, a lieutenant governor's race. It is the office of the moment that has the best chance of saving us from governmental demise and chaos that threatens us right now. I believe we can do it. I believe we're going to win. We're going to need everyone's help.
Thank you. Joe?
Okay, Lana, two things that we all know. All politics is local, and the voters are always right. So, all politics is local. The Attorney General is the hit man right now who takes it to cities, counties, and school districts, ending their autonomy. And unfortunately, that is where all of us, all Texans, can reach out and touch their government. Speak at the city council meeting for the 3-minute public hearing. Go to your school district and go to the chili supper at your local school. Go to the county judge and talk to them about things. That's the spectrum of power. But the Attorney General has crushed local decision-making authority. So that's what I want everyone to focus upon in answer to your first question. And it segues nicely, Lana, into my experience. I am a former mayor. Among the 4 people left standing to be your next Attorney General, the 2 on the Republican and the 2 here, I'm the only one who has local decision-making authority experience. I was mayor after Hurricane Ike. I fought bullies and racists to deliver first-class community public housing because Barack Obama's roommate from Harvard, Sean Donovan, the HUD secretary, called me and said, "Mayor, we're counting on you." The racists tried to recall me, Lana, and I beat them. They ran people against me, and I beat them all except for one. And I got in a runoff like I'm in right now. And they came to me during that runoff, and they said, "Mayor, you drop this plan for rebuilding public housing, and we'll pull our candidate back, and you'll have your second term." Well, I told them all to go to hell. And I fought for the housing. I lost re-election, but I got the housing built. And that's what I want people to know. In that story are 2 things. I've got experience as a mayor, and that connects with people. Number 2, I've got the courage to stand up for what I believe in. And I'm not worried about what other people voted. I do what I know is right. Imagine an attorney general who does that.
Great. I want to thank you both so much for joining us tonight and taking this time to speak with us. It was really helpful for me to clarify a lot of things, and I'm sure so many on this call. And I do really want to reiterate something that Nathan said here, in that these offices are arguably just as, if not more important, in the way that they affect everyday Texans' lives as the state Senate seat, as the federal Senate seat that is on the ballot, which is going to garner a lot of attention. So make sure when you're talking to your friends and family and community members that you are leaning in to the importance of not only the attorney generals, but also the lieutenant governors, who we are going to talk to, those 2 runoff candidates next. So thank you so much, Senator and Mayor, for being here. We appreciate your time. And we will make sure that we follow up with everybody on the call and see if they have any other questions, and we'll send them your way so that you have an opportunity to address them if you'd like.
Thank you.
Thank you for the work you do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lana.
All right, y'all. So next, we're moving on to our candidates for lieutenant governor. And when we say that this is one of the most important seats on the ballot right now, I could not lean into that more heavily, because this seat is the one that sets the whole legislative agenda for what happens to set laws and policies in our state. And as we saw with Roe, that started in Texas. Texas is ground zero, a testing ground for what we can pass here that then can become federal law. So we know that the decisions that we make in our state house and our state senate, those decisions that are put on the agenda by whoever the lieutenant governor is, can turn into national problems. So I want to welcome Representative Vicki Goodwin and Mr. Velez here. They are two runoff candidates for the upcoming runoff election. Vicki Goodwin is a Texan who grew up in Dallas and then moved to Austin in 1985 to attend the University of Texas. To attend the University of Texas here. I say here because I'm in Austin. Sorry, y'all. Vicki is currently a Texas State House representative serving Travis County since 2018. Representative Goodwin is also a small business owner running a residential real estate business with her husband. As a member of the Appropriations Article 3 subcommittee overseeing education funding, she champions educational equality or equity and access at all levels. Her priorities are to increase funding to public schools, housing affordability, water infrastructure, and access to health care. Welcome, Vicki. Next, we have Mr. Velez. He is a lifelong blue-collar worker and labor leader who grew up in Houston with a single mother. He worked in Texas refineries and eventually joined the United Steelworkers, where he has spent more than a decade bargaining with major corporations, advocating for safer conditions, fair pay, and stronger benefits. He also advocated for working people at the national level, including by participating in the White House Summit to strengthen the American workforce. Welcome. I'm so glad to have both of you here. And in case you weren't on at the beginning of the call, we are basically giving 2 minutes. You'll see a clock at the top. We will ask a question and we'll rotate who answers first and who answers second. So we'll dive right in. Also, if you do want to have a rebuttal to something that the other person says, we are willing to entertain that and we'll give a minute to it at the end. But I want to be incredibly respectful of everybody's time, including yours. And I know we're already over time, so I apologize, but I'm going to try to, keep it tight for y'all. So the first question, and Representative, you'll be the first person to answer this one. How would you each best describe the duties of Lieutenant Governor of Texas, and how does your past experience prepare you for those duties?
Thank you, Lana. Thank you for having us on tonight so that people can learn more about the Lieutenant Governor. I'm always amazed when I am out on the campaign trail how few people really know what the Lieutenant Governor does, that the Lieutenant Governor heads the Senate, makes decisions about who is on what committee. There's 31 senators, and who is on the committees and who heads the committees really makes a big difference in what bills get passed onto the governor's desk. So the lieutenant governor also has a huge influence on our budget, how our public tax dollars are spent. And of course, we all know that in the last legislative session, Dan Patrick pushed through vouchers, and we are spending $1 billion on private schools, which I am completely against. And so what gives me the best start in this position is that I have served for 8 years in the Texas legislature. Yes, I've been in the House, and the House operates a little bit different than the Senate, but I know how legislation gets passed. I have passed legislation and built relationships in order to get that done. In fact, I've passed legislation with Senator Alvarado around violence prevention. I've passed legislation with Senator Zaffarini, who is the Dean of the Senate. So I look forward to bringing all of the Democratic senators together to strategize when I am elected lieutenant governor, to make sure that we are putting the right people on the right committees and giving leadership positions to Democrats again. That, I think, is incredibly important. Currently, the lieutenant governor does not allow Democrats to chair committees. And so we see that his influence is incredibly great. He will tell senators that if you don't vote my way, then that project that you want for your district may just go away. He uses his power, and he doesn't allow for dissent in the Senate. And things will be so different with a new lieutenant governor. And I look forward to that day.
Great. Thank you, Representative. Mr. Velez.
Oh, hey, so look, the lieutenant governor should be the voice of the people in the Texas Senate. The lieutenant governor should be the one that prioritizes legislation that benefits the everyday person, normal working Texans. Obviously, we have a lieutenant governor that is interested in multinational corporations, big business, special interest. We could go on and on about all the problems with the current lieutenant governor. But when you talk about prior experience, I think working for a labor union, being an advocate for working class people, when we talk about what Texas desperately needs, I have delivered on the things that working class people need. And so I've delivered higher wages. I've delivered safer working conditions. I've delivered programs that benefit our communities, expanded healthcare access. Very proud that when you look at organized labor and the contracts I've negotiated, we have some of the only healthcare plans that cover people regardless of their marital status, summary plan descriptions that make sure that members of the LGBTQ plus community aren't boxed out because of last name mismatches. Adopted children are able to be covered. You're able to get whatever medical services a doctor deems necessary because, hey, who knew that doctors knew what they were talking about, right? And so I think it's really important that we have someone that's running the Texas Senate, that's setting the budget, that's going to focus on things that benefit the people that keep the state running and not the multinational corporations that donate to campaigns.
Great. Thank you so much for that. So the next question, Mr. Velez, you'll go first, and then Vicki, you'll go second. If we have a majority Republican legislature, how would you navigate being the Democratic lieutenant governor? How will you leverage your role to protect Texans from bad bills? Are there specific Senate rules that you would change? And how would you work with the House chamber?
Sure. So I'll work backwards. Hey, I'd work with the House chamber on bills that are popular with Texans. I think that it's shared across party lines. When you look at voters, raising the state minimum wage is popular. Raising wages is popular because it helps people with their daily expenditures. Expanding healthcare access is popular across party lines, especially when you look at rural corners of Texas where hospitals are shutting down and people have a really hard time getting access to medical care. When you look at things that benefit everyday people, they're popular, but they're not popular with our current leadership. Now, when you get into any rules we would change, look, I think you have to bring that change so that you can actually be effective. And so the biggest change I would make is the transparency that we operate within the Texas Senate. I believe that we need to allow the press on the Senate floor. I think that we need to make sure that the public is aware of what's being discussed and what's being debated. And that brings accountability to the people that are A is the obstruction, then the voters who put that person into office can hold them accountable, and it makes it much easier for us to get our legislation accomplished. Now, when you talk about working in a hostile environment or working with Republicans or whoever may be there, look, I don't believe that relationships have gotten us anywhere as Democrats in this state. I believe that we're in radical times and we have to stand up and fight. And so if they're willing to come along and it's going to be good for working people, then it's good for us. But I don't believe that collaboration with terrorists has ever gotten us anywhere. And so we're in extraordinary times. We need to take a hard stance and be unapologetically progressive and fight for values that will uplift everyday people within the state of Texas.
Great. Thank you so much. Representative?
Sure. So, I have served as a Democrat in a Republican legislature, so I am familiar with the difficulty of getting things passed in that situation. But, recently Dan Patrick said that the Republicans run the risk of losing the House. That means 14 House seats flip from Republican to Democrat. Boy, wouldn't that be great with Democrats in the majority in the Texas House. And of course, the lieutenant governor seat would also be at risk if we had that many Democrats show up to vote and flip those seats and flip the lieutenant governor position. So regardless of the composition, I have worked hard to build relationships with other senators, and Democrats are very strategic. We know what needs to be done. We need to make sure that we're supporting our public schools so that every kid in the state has a great opportunity. We need to support our higher ed. We need to make sure that we fix our broken healthcare system, that we address affordability issues. And I have worked with the House. I've been in the House, so I certainly will be able to do that. Now, the thing that I would change is I think it would be critically important to allow testimony from people all over the state. Now, when COVID happened, we did allow that virtual testimony, and it was great. Unfortunately, the following session, when we said, let's keep that going, they said no. But I think people from El Paso to East Texas, to Beaumont, it's hard for them to take off work, to travel to the Capitol, to tell their story, to give testimony, but they have important things to say. So I think allowing that virtual testimony is not hard for us to do. The big complaint was that, well, if we do that, testimony will go on forever. Well, there's ways to solve that problem. We can limit it, but at least we can allow more people from around the state to give their input.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Okay, so the next question is, when you were elected into office in November 2026, we are headed right into a legislative session in January 2027. As Lieutenant Governor, is there a new committee that you would create? And what would your SB1, SB2, and SB3? And what would be your SB1, SB2, SB3? Sorry. And Vicki, I'm sorry. Representative, it's your turn this time.
Okay, you can call me Vicki. I am fine with that. So, when I looked at the committees that the Senate has, they're all named something different than what we have in the House. So it is a little different. There's a lot fewer senators. So every senator sits on more committees than we do as House members. There is a committee that I think is lacking in the Senate, and that is elections. So one of the things that I would like to see with regards to elections is online voter registration. I would like to see ranked choice voting. I would like to make sure we have better rules around redistricting. The fact that we were able to push through a new map without voters' approval is wrong. We should only allow redistricting once a decade, within 2 years after the census is taken, and we should have independent redistricting commissions like other states do. So an elections committee is what I would add. There may be other additions or subtractions. There's a committee currently that exists that I'm not sure we really need around border protection. That should be a federal issue, and we could probably handle that in the State Affairs Committee. Because when we have a committee set up, that means we're putting a lot of emphasis on that. I want to make sure, again, that we're putting the emphasis on healthcare, education, affordability. And so we'll make sure that we have the right committees for that. My first three bills, the first bill is the budget. And in that budget, I am not going to agree to even $1 going to a private school voucher scam. The second bill is going to be school funding. Our school funding is incredibly complex. I want to simplify it. I want to increase the basic allotment. We need to catch up to inflation. We need to take out some of these requirements and hoops that the school districts have to jump through, simplify. And then my third bill will be a citizen-led ballot initiative. I know that might surprise you. There's so many bill ideas I have, but so often we don't do what the people of Texas want. Allowing them a voice through a citizen ballot initiative, I think, is really important.
Excellent. Thank you. Mr. Velez?
Hey, thank you. So when you look at the committees, I think right now what we're lacking is a committee on cost of living and economic security. So right now, Texans are struggling. It doesn't really matter what bill we pass if the people at home have bills they can't pay. And so we live in a state with the 8th largest economy in the world. We need to make sure that we're laser focused on making sure that the Texans that built this state can afford to live here. When you start talking about, first, second, and third bills that we would pass, obviously, we have to pass a budget, but I think when you start looking at bills, the first bill for me is raising the state minimum wage. We have, one of the lowest state minimum wages, lower than 30 other states, the lowest in the country. You look at what's going on within this state, and even if you don't make minimum wage, there's a gap that your employer keeps between your wages and the state minimum wage or those wages below you. And so a rising tide lifts all boats. Raising the state minimum wage will immediately make this state more affordable for all Texans. It'll help those seniors that we have within our ranks that are looking at retiring but scared to retire because they're worried about adult children. It would help people that are, instead of living paycheck to paycheck, they're living overdraft to overdraft. So that's obviously my number one priority. You get into number two, and it's funding our public education. But for me, that goes far beyond just making sure that schools have what they need to operate. Teachers need the right to collectively bargain within the state so that they can set the floor for their wages, their benefits, their working conditions. And we have to make sure that our schools are properly funded so that administratively we have buildings with like heat and AC. That's not a novel concept. The third one would be expanding healthcare access within this state. We have the highest rate of uninsured people in the nation. It's a very large state, but we carry $24 billion over last year in surplus. That's money that is not going back to our citizens, and healthcare is a human right.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, the next question is UT Tyler's poll from last year in June 2025 found that inflation and the cost of living is the #1 policy concern for Texas voters. Is addressing the affordability crisis one of your top priorities? And what are the ways you plan to practically improve the cost of living for Texans as Lieutenant Governor?
I feel like I just ran into the last question, but look,
You did. It
addressing
was a perfect setup.
uh, addressing the cost of living is my #1 priority. Again, there's a hierarchy of needs, and if you can't afford to pay your bills, I don't think you care about anything else outside of that immediate need. And so, look, the affordability crisis is real, but it's also something that's been manufactured by our state leadership. They have left working class people behind. It's really one of the big issues that gave rise to my candidacy and why I felt like we had to stop electing people that didn't come from our lived realities. When you look at how we're going to approach that, look, the lieutenant governor has power over state-sponsored apprenticeship plans. I think that we can expand opportunity for young people. We can create good family-sustaining apprenticeship programs. We can use those apprentices to increase the supply of housing. They can lower the cost just through a sheer increase in the amount of supply, all the while raising wages and making sure that healthcare is more affordable. And so, with a multi-pronged approach, making sure that people have access to medical care, schools are funded, teachers have the right to bargain so they can have living wages. I do believe the state minimum wage should be set at whatever a living wage is at the time. And I think that in and of itself will change the economic landscape for Texans. We can't leave rural Texas behind. And so when we're looking at all these programs, we have to make sure that we especially focus on communities. You know, you get out into places like Harper, Mountain Home, the median wage is much lower. Some of that can be attributed to you have retirees out there, but a lot of it is just that there isn't as much opportunity. And so we should increase opportunity in rural Texas as well. And again, a rising tide lifts all boats. And I think we'll live in a much better state when we have a lieutenant governor that understands the stresses of paying bills, that understands the pains of raising a family, and that's focused on elevating working class people instead of lifting up multinational corporations and letting them steal from the people that build the state.
Great. Thank you. Representative?
Yeah, so we do have an affordability crisis, and that is a top issue of mine. With the Trump tariff, the Trump war, the Trump deportations, we're seeing a huge hit to our economy, and it's very concerning. There are things that we can do at the state level, even though we can't get rid of Trump right away, but there are policies we can put in place. Now, I have filed a bill to raise the minimum wage every session that I have been in office, and that is something that we need to do. I also agree that a great education leads to opportunity. So again, focusing on K through 12 and higher ed. We've got to look at the things that are costing people a lot of money. In many situations, it's healthcare. I've seen people who aren't able to buy a home because they have medical debt. And so we need to make sure that people are able to go see a doctor early on, get their healthcare taken care of. We know preventive medicine is so much less expensive than when somebody goes to the emergency room. So there's healthcare policy that we could put in place, childcare. Childcare is hugely expensive, and it keeps some people from entering the workforce because they have to consider, am I going to be spending every dollar I make on childcare? So there are ways that we can supplement childcare payments. I had a proposal last session to allow a pot of money to help people pay their childcare expenses while they have children that age. There's a lot of policy ideas that are out there that are great. We have, we can't lower grocery prices, but we can increase people's salary, increase teacher pay, increase the pay for our state employees. We have hearing after hearing where our state agency leadership comes in and says, we can't retain our employees. And that's costly too, because then you have to train a whole new set of employees too frequently. So increasing pay among state employees, teachers, everyday workers. And, I have been in that position myself. Affordability is #1.
Excellent. Thank you both. Okay, this next question is, and we only have 2 left. We are doing so good about staying on time. Thank you for that. I think this is an important moment to speak to our state budget. Clearly, we have a lot to get done and to invest in. Can you speak to your experience with our state budget and how you can realistically reorganize investment into these concerns without further burdening everyday Texans?
Yes, absolutely. So, this session I asked to be on appropriations and I used my seniority to be on the committee so that I could learn more about the process, how our budget gets set. It's a huge budget, lots of moving pieces, and I learned a lot by being on the appropriations committee. I was on Article 3, which covers public education, and then there's 11 articles. It's very complicated, but what happens is the agency commissioners come in, they talk about the state agency, what their needs are. But you know what? When things are so complicated, like our school funding formula, it's hard to follow the dollars. And so I think that there are a lot of things that we could improve where our dollars are going. We need safety net programs. They help people get back on their feet. And then when we don't, we find out later on we're having to pay more. The legislature is terrible about funding adequately Medicaid, for example. So every session we come back and we have to use dollars and bulk up that fund because we didn't fund it adequately to begin with. Why do we do that? I think there are so many opportunities for improving the budget. And I'll give one example. Last session, $70 million got appropriated to an organization that used to be called Alternatives to Abortion. Now, we as Democrats fought against that because we no longer allow for abortion. So why is this organization still needed? And yet the Republicans still voted in favor of $70 million to an organization that really has very little to do with healthcare and more about diaper dispersal, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but this is in our healthcare budget. There are much better programs that we could be funding. There are places where we can move dollars around. I am familiar with the current budget, and that will help me when I'm lieutenant governor.
Excellent. Thank you. Mr. Velez?
Yes, ma'am. So when you look at the state budget, obviously labor negotiator, negotiate with multinational corporations that have a higher annual revenue stream than the state's biannual budget, responsible for large sums of money. I mean, very large membership. And so when you look, I think the most important thing we need to focus on in the state budget is the fact that Texans are sick and tired of it being used for political theater. They're sick and tired of it being used for things that do them absolutely no good. We have the resources. We have a sufficient budget in the state. But to answer the second part of your question, how do we invest in the things we need without burdening everyday Texans? There are revenue streams that we are leaving on the table. Why we have not legalized cannabis and recreational use of marijuana in this state is beside me. What a consenting adult does in their home is their own business. The government has no business in people's bedrooms, in their bodies, anywhere, right? But the reality is that's also a tax revenue stream that we could be bringing in and we could use to offset the burden of property taxes. The state of Texas does not carry a 50-50 split on the cost of education right now. So homeowners are carrying a disproportionate share of the cost of our public education, and we're still underfunding it. And so really, when you look at the state budget, I believe, one, you have to surround yourself with good people. Look, I believe in science. I believe in math, something that the Republican Party has drifted away from. And so we need to make sure that we prioritize things that benefit working class people. We have to drift away from these archaic belief systems and welcome new revenue streams that'll lower the burden on working class people. And we have to invest in things that matter, like healthcare, education, expanded job access. So, I mean, I think that's the approach, and I think that's how we should handle the budget.
Great. Thank you very much. And for the final question, y'all, what do you want to express to voters that you have not already this evening? Perhaps this is the opportunity to say what sets you apart in this race and why you are best equipped to be the next lieutenant governor of Texas.
Is that my turn first?
It's Mr. Velez's turn first this time.
All right. Hey, so look, I want to thank you guys for allowing me the opportunity to speak here. I think when you look at this race, it's really important that we focus on what candidates can do from their background. And I think we also have to look at what we've done in this state that hasn't worked. And we have run traditional politicians up and down this ballot in this state for years and years and years. And we've continued to lose ground with working class people, the people that I've been able to build bridges with and be successful with on a daily basis. Whether they're Democrats, Republicans, or independents, we have to be honest about the fact that blue-collar Texans, Latinos, People of color have slowly drifted away from the Democratic Party. That's largely due to a lack of representation, but it's also due to a lack of results. And so I understand that it's difficult to get things done, but from a labor perspective, we are always in the minority. We are always up against special interest, and we win by rallying the community and using the support of everyday people. And so I would be honored to earn you guys' support. I understand your lived reality. I think I have more in common with just about any Texan on this call than any other candidate in this race. And while I do think that there are other candidates that have valuable life experience, I think what's most critical right now is the affordability crisis. And our entire platform is built on delivering real wins and real gains for working class people, like I do every single day within organized labor. Within labor, we are the only job sites where women make dollar for dollar what men make. That is not a novel concept. It's not a radical idea to think that more important than who your neighbor chooses to love is whether or not your neighbor is housed and has access to healthcare. It is not a radical idea to think that more important than the 10 commandments hanging on classroom walls is whether or not teachers can pay their bills and whether they can actually live in the profession they chose. So my name is Marcos Velez. I'd be honored to earn you guys' vote in the runoff. And I'd love to lead as lieutenant governor so that we can shift the focus off of special interest and back to normal everyday Texans.
Thank you so much. Representative?
Thank you, Lana. So I just want to start by saying I ran for the first time in 2018. I ran against a 4-term incumbent Republican. A lot of people were very skeptical that I could win the race, but I did. I did it with hard work, with the relationships that I had built over the years preceding that in the community. So I've always been involved in my community as my kids were growing up, got involved in their schools, had a very good example set by my parents who were also very involved in my life. I run a business, and as a younger person, I said, I will never own my own business because I saw my parents struggling with that very thing. But I did. I decided to start a real estate company, and now my daughter owns her own business despite us trying to get her to wait, and she runs a small dance studio in California. I love Texas. I ran because I want to make Texas a better place. I flipped my seat. I've held on to it. In 2020, the Republicans tried to take it back. They spent $1 million against me. They ran an Austin police officer against me. Thankfully, I was able to hold the seat. And then in 2021, they redistricted and took out 70,000 people from my district, one of the more conservative neighborhoods. And so it became a 60-40 Democratic leaning district. At that point in time, I thought, I have a little extra time. I can do some traveling. We often hear from the rural areas that they don't hear from Democrats and they don't know what we're doing in the legislature. So I went out to Nacogdoches where I have extended family. I went to West Texas and I visited with those communities to let them know, as a Democrat, here are some things that I've gotten past. I love working in the legislature. It is a challenge. And I know that until we have different leadership of governor and lieutenant governor, we're not going to get the big things done. And that's why I'm running for lieutenant governor. I want to make sure that Texans have a better life, and I hope that you'll vote for me.
Great. I want to thank both of you for joining us tonight. This was incredibly helpful for myself, and I'm sure all of the other people that were on the call here tonight. I appreciate your time. And for everybody who is on the call this evening, this is where you get to work. This is where you take the opportunity, if you've been involved with Blue Action, to activate the program, start reaching out to your network, your friends and families, and let them know. Again, early voting starts on Monday the 18th. It will run through the end of the week. There is no weekend voting. And election day is the day after the holiday weekend, meaning that if people are traveling and they are not coming back until potentially that Tuesday, they have to vote early. So if you aren't a part of the Blue Action Network, please join one of our upcoming trainings and learn how you can access the tools and resources that we use to activate and turn out and educate voters. And if you are a part, now's the time to get busy. Thank you, everybody, for joining tonight. This was fantastic. If you have any questions, please email our team and expect that tomorrow you will get an email from Serena. Don't be afraid to check your spam box if you don't see it. That will be a follow-up to tonight's meeting, and make sure that we are able to answer any of your questions, and that you have all the information you need to be a productive voter yourself. So thanks again for being here. We'll see you at the ballot box.